So cloud has become the top operating model for most companies, especially during the pandemic. What does cloud mean for a company's bottom line? And are there nuances driving these cloud decisions? To discuss this and more, I'm super excited here to have with me Martin Casado, my good friend. Martin is a general partner at the venture capital firm of Andreessen Horowitz. But I've known Martin since his days as a PhD student at Stanford, where he pioneered software-defined networking and created one of the first companies of that era, Nicira. And we worked together for a bit at VMware as well. So welcome, Martin, and great to have you with us today. What are the strengths that you're seeing when it comes to use of cloud?
I think it's important for everyone to remember that we're still actually in the early days of cloud. So, depending on who you ask, the cloud market is $300 billion a year right now. Most estimates suggest it's growing 20% year on year, and that will go for the next, almost decade, right? And so if you compare that to the $3 trillion IT industry, it's a very large market, but it's still early. And with that is we're still just starting to understand the implications of cloud. Like we know the benefits, we know like agility, we know the benefits, but we're just starting to understand the economic implications. And it turns out for some companies, actually, this is fairly significant. And so we're entering an era now, and I would view this as almost like cloud V2 understanding, where, there's a lot of discussion around like, what is the right architecture for cloud? What is the right cost model for cloud? How should I use cloud in the correct ways? And so I think this is kind of where we are in the cloud adoption cycle.
I agree, Martin. So to your point, we've seen lots of companies taking on public cloud initiatives. And when we talk to IT leaders, they talk about scale, agility, and the speed of development and being able to bring out new applications quickly. All that is not a surprise. I think there's perhaps a little bit less of an understanding of the true cost of cloud. Now, you've had a front seat position here as you sit on the boards and you've invested in a number of these born in the cloud companies, software companies and SaaS companies that really started doing everything in the public cloud. You published a fairly controversial paper here around the true cost of cloud here, and also talked about it as a bit of a paradox. And I think you call it $1 trillion paradox, if I'm not mistaken. And So what were the key findings?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I sit on a board of these companies. I've seen you sit there in these board meetings, you're like, wow, like 50% of our COGS, 70% of our COGS, 80% of our COGS are cloud. What's going on? So to understand this, we looked at 50 public companies, the vast majority of which IPO'd in the last 6 years. And we spelunked through S1s and we asked the question, what percentage of COGS is cloud? Mm-hmm. These are software companies, right? And it turned out that it was 50%, which is just an enormous number, right? And then we asked the question, like, listen, if 50% of the COGS is cloud, if you reduce that by a factor of 2, which is totally doable in many cases, how will that impact the share price of these companies? And across the 50 companies that we talked to, we estimate between $100 to $200 billion would be, is being suppressed, which is like, this is $200 billion across 50 companies. And by the way, the $1 trillion paradox is that, if you extend this, we were just looking at 50 companies. If you extend this industry wide, it's very easy to come up with $500 billion to $1 trillion. And so, listen, we're just starting to have companies that IPO that are heavily reliant on the cloud. We're just starting to understand the economics. And the result is that, it makes up a large portion of COGS, and that greatly, greatly suppresses the share price, unless you're able to drop it.
So are you suggesting, Martin, that these born in the cloud companies actually repatriate workloads on-prem?
So it's interesting is when we started the work, for the paper, the research for the paper, the goal was just to do a cost analysis. We didn't even want to come up with suggestions of what you do. We're like, listen, how much of a company's economics are driven by the cloud? In these conversations, and we really talked to dozens, many companies we spoke to says that they've either repatriated or repatriation. And so, we don't take a position on this. However, it is being done today, and it is being considered today, and clearly there are cost advantages if you do it right. And so, in the large continuum of solutions, whether it's optimize better or buy a third-party tool for visibility or push it so your engineers think about cost, or repatriation, we think it is something that customers should have in the conversation. It should be part of the conversation.
So we've got about 20,000 plus enterprise customers who are starting the journey in a different way, right? They all started with on-prem data centers, and almost everybody there is looking to use the public cloud. What advice would you have for these companies as they go to the cloud? And what should they be looking out and learn from the lessons of all your SaaS companies?
So this is fairly obvious, but it's so important it bears repeating, which is optionality is critically important. And the right way to do that is upfront is multi-cloud. And it just seems to be already a reality. I mean, HashiCorp just did a survey which showed that 76% of companies are already multi-cloud. Bank of America had a CIO report that basically said the same thing recently. And so it's just important to realize that, just like all companies are becoming software companies, it feels like all software companies are becoming SaaS companies. And if you're building a SaaS service, which is really the primary mechanism of distributing software, the cloud becomes part of your COGS. And the primary way to rein that in is by having optionality on the back end. And listen, this is why I think Nutanix is so trend aligned. I mean, the world is coming your way, which is cloud is not a location. It's not a company. Cloud is an operating model. And that operating model is something that you can consume as on-prem equipment. You can consume it in a colo, or you consume it as a service over the public internet. The important thing is that you have optionality in how you consume it.
So, Martin, I think what you just said outlines exactly our vision, right? I agree with you 100%. Cloud is an operating model. Our customers are going to operate in this multi-cloud world, and I think there's an opportunity for them to do cloud right as they move forward and learn from the lessons of all these companies that have been in the cloud. So wonderful having you with us, Martin. Thank you so much, and all the best.
Awesome. Thank you.